But I want to ask you also about Prokofiev himself, whom you knew.
I knew him, and we remained in touch until the war. Alas, I never saw him after about 1937 or 38. We came back from America to Europe on the same boat, and he wanted to persuade me to take up the second violin concerto. He played it to me, shouted the whole piece, the violin part. He didn't have a voice, but he sang the violin part as like composers do. I never took it up, but I did do my bit for the three sonatas, because there are three.
Reading between the lines, I wonder if Prokofiev wasn't rather a boorish, rude...
Yes, he was very outspoken and very undiplomatic with conductors too.
Why was that? Was he just a sort of peasant-like character?
Oh no, he wasn't at all a peasant-like character. I think his father was an administrator of a big estate.
But he was difficult to get on with.
Yes, oh yes. I never had any trouble. There is a diary of his in which he tells the story of how he asked to come to the rehearsal when I played it with Ansermet in Paris.
But the first concerto?
The first concerto, after I had already played it all over the world. And I told him, oh, look, I consider this piece so much my own, and I would feel happier if you are not there and you don't listen to my talks and instructions to the musicians and to the conductor. After all, he was the parent. I always considered myself the parent. That's the vanity of performing virtuosos, you know. They identify themselves with what they play, because there comes a time when the performer has immersed himself to a much greater extent than the parent, the composer, who has cast it off. Like we cast off, well-adjusted parents and children have to break.
I remember that Bloch was very disapproving of the performance of Feuermann and Stokowski of Shalomo, which is one of the most eloquent
marvelous performance. Yes, well...
Did you work with Bloch a lot?
Yes. I know that he's a little out of fashion at present, but so is your Vaughan Williams, so is Sibelius, and these neglects and these rediscoveries are in the nature of things. There are cycles.
Did you do any premieres of Bartok works?
Yes, I did the first Rhapsody, which was written for me in 1928. I did both the orchestra version and the piano version. The piano was written first, and then he orchestrated it. We recorded the Rhapsody and Contrasts, the piece he wrote for Benny and for myself, in May 1940. And I'm glad to be able to tell not only you but the listeners that a private recording by the librarian of the U.S. Library of Congress in Washington, where we played this recital at a festival, is going to be released. This was a recording made in 1940 of a program consisting of the Kreutzer Sonata, the Debussy Sonata, the first Rhapsody, and the second Bartók Sonata.
All these with Bartok?
All these with Bartók at the piano.
Goodness, how did he play the Kreutzer?
Oh, that's... one could write a long essay on that. He was a great connoisseur and lover and interpreter of Beethoven. And it's very sad that the recording companies never took advantage of the possibility of fixing a great composer's view of these great works, which he played in his early years all the time. You see, it's only after the mid-30s that he limited himself to sonata recitals. These are the unforgivable sins of omission of big business. When you think that in around 1946, 47, there were, I believe, 4 recordings of his in the catalogs. Now open any catalog and just see this proliferation of performances of his works. This is one of the sore points that I suppose any performer at my age will tell you about, that the industry does not do its duty by the young generations, that they allow these performances by Cortot and Adolf Busch and young Rudolf Serkin and Supervia and so on. I could just go on.
But they are coming back steadily.
Some of them, but it is a very small percentage. There are recordings of mine that I made in the early 30s that I would give anything to be able to get myself. I sometimes advertise for them. There is the Ernest Bloch concerto, which I made in 38, and which really held its place in the catalog. I'm glad to hear that Yehudi has recorded it now. But still, whatever recording comes later in the life of a work should not obscure the importance of the first. Just like in literature, after all, we hunt for first editions, don't we? There is the question of the original text. There is the question of the changes that works undergo in the course of time.
It's a pity, of course, that one can't trust some of the very earliest recordings, because one feels that they were probably made under such difficult conditions, or with managers holding clocks, you know.
Yes, I can imagine.
Did you have that in your when you first?
No. I must say, I was not haunted by the clock.
If you had your time again, would you have preferred to make records of complete performances, or would you still tackle it section by section?
If I could do it all over again, I would go out for the complete performance. And more, I say this with more conviction than ever, because of these 10 Beethoven sonatas that were put on records in 1944 when I played with Claudio Arrau, and which now belatedly, luckily, have been released without any possibility of modifying anything. They are, you can hear the coughs, the applause was in it too. We cut out the applause, but we couldn't cut out the cough.
But you think the performances of those are better than
they have a single-mindedness. They have a feeling of direction that only a performance that addresses itself to a living audience can have. I know I'm talking against my own interests and against the ideology of all record collectors, but there is nothing that can replace this clear-cut progress of a work that is produced with the sounding board of an audience.